Hello, thank you so much for joining this broadcast of Safe Cosmetics, Ingredients to Avoid. My name is Connie Engel and I am the Science and Education Manager here at the Breast Cancer Fund and also for the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics. I'm going to talk to you today about a number of ingredients in personal care products that are very good choices to avoid, as well as some tips for choosing better alternatives. So as we dive in, I want to talk first about why we're concerned. So every chemical, every ingredient that I'm going to talk about today has been determined to have adverse health effects by at least one authoritative body. And we're talking here about major players such as the International Agency for Research on Cancer and the National Toxicology Program, both of which provide experience and data and information about carcinogens, as well as other organizations that have looked specifically at mammary gland carcinogens, endocrine disruption, and developmental and reproductive toxicity. We're concerned about ingredients in personal care products that have the characteristics that I'm going to talk about, and we're concerned about those ingredients even at very low doses. In many cases, we're talking about very small amounts of different ingredients, and yet we have serious concerns about low doses of many of these, particularly those linked to endocrine disruption and developmental toxicity. In some of these cases, there are no thresholds for health effects. In others, we know that because the body's own hormones tend to orchestrate the amazing effects that they have, allowing us to develop prenatally, to lay down the structures of breast tissue and the brain and the reproductive organs, to go through puberty, to have pregnancies. All of those things are hormonally orchestrated using very small amounts of the body's own hormones as chemical messengers. So it's not surprising that in cases where chemicals can disrupt the body's own hormones, that happens at very low doses as well. In addition to these low dose effects, in some cases, low doses aren't so low after all when you add together the ingredients in every product that we use, as well potentially as the same ingredients being used in other household products. Another concern is that personal care products are themselves mixtures. And we know that in some cases, when we have chemicals that enter our body together, there are some enhanced negative effects. So if we're not watching for that, that's a concern there as well. And as I talked about, in some cases, exposures early in life may have some of the most serious long-term health effects. And this can be true even during prenatal development. So exposures very early in life and the exposures to pregnant women really matter. So we're going to dive now into a medicine cabinet. And we're going to start with some face powder. And the concern here is that this is a loose powder. And in some cases, companies use titanium dioxide in these kinds of loose powders. This means that this is an inhalable version of titanium dioxide, which is listed as a carcinogen. Now in creams and lotions, titanium dioxide is much more of a safe alternative, but in powder form, it's a concern. Talc is another concern, and that's because it can be contaminated with asbestos. Now, there are many companies that actually have policies on talc, and you can find those on their websites. And if they are testing their talc for asbestos, then it's not a concern that it's in the product. But if talc is listed and the company offers no policy, it might be a good choice to avoid. And finally is the ingredient PTFE, full name polytetrafluoroethylene. This is a fluorine-based compound, and this is made using perfluorooctanoic acid, or PFOA. PFOA is a mammary gland carcinogen as well as a developmental toxicant, and it's also been found to delay puberty in girls exposed to it. We're concerned that PTFE can be contaminated with PFOA, and so avoiding that in face powders can be a very good idea. In lipstick, lead can be a very likely contaminant. Both the Safe Cosmetics campaign as well as the FDA have found lead as contaminants in many popular lipsticks. But there are companies, and again, you can find these policies on their websites, that do test for lead contamination in the ingredients they're using to make their lipsticks, and therefore those provide some safer alternatives. In our fragrances, and this includes both perfumes and colognes, as well as heavily fragranced lotions and soaps, there are a number of hormone disruptors, such as diethyl phthalate or DEP, and synthetic musks that are used in those fragrances. The problem here is that the only word you're likely to see on the label is fragrance, and as a result, you have no way of knowing if that fragrance contains these hormone-disrupting compounds. A way to avoid that is to avoid any product that simply lists the word fragrance with no clear disclosure of what's in that fragrance, either on the product or on the website, and instead go for products that are fragranced and where every ingredient is fully disclosed. Sometimes it just won't say anything about fragrance on the product label because they've articulated out everything that is in their fragrance. In nail colorings, we have a number of different ingredients of concern: dibutyl phthalate, toluene, formaldehyde, which is a carcinogen, a known carcinogen, and benzophenone 1, which is put in there as a UV protectant and has concerns for endocrine disruption. Moving on to eyeshadows, this is really very similar situation to the face powder. You'll see a lot of quite similar ingredients in any kind of a color cosmetics powder. And while an eyeshadow is a little bit more of a compressed powder, as soon as you start putting it on the applicator and putting it on your eyes, usually a little bit of particulate escapes. So again, we have concerns about titanium dioxide as an inhalable powder in this case, as well as PTFE and talc. Moving on to both mascaras and eyeliners, we have the potential for carbon black, sometimes listed as a colorant number, CI 77266, to be used as a coloring, especially in darker colored mascaras, as well as a number of formaldehyde-releasing preservatives that are used to have the very essential function of keeping these products free from bacteria and fungi. Those are good properties to have. Unfortunately, formaldehyde-releasing preservatives slowly release little bits of a carcinogen into the product, which is not such a good property to have. So avoiding those on mascaras and eyeliners can be a good move, and there are lots of options available out there. Face creams, especially anti-aging creams, are increasingly being found with polyacrylamide and PTFE. We've already talked about PTFE, but polyacrylamide is made using the carcinogen acrylamide, and studies have found that some acrylamide is likely to remain in the products, and we're concerned about how much that might be. And so in the cases where you have anti-aging creams that use one or both of these, it's good to avoid that and choose a different product. Hair dyes are another product category of concern because of the use of the chemicals resorcinol, which is a thyroid hormone disruptor, as well as p-phenylenediamine, which is a concern for serious allergic reactions and potential mutagenicity. Basically, it can alter the genetic material of cells. And so we're concerned about those. And while we wait for someone to develop a hair dye that works but doesn't use these, it might be best to simply dye or color your hair less frequently or let it go natural. Baby shampoos. Now we know that there are examples such as Johnson & Johnson that have reformulated to make sure none of the worst chemicals still remain in their products, and we applaud their efforts. However, many other companies have not yet followed suit. We would love to see them do that. In the meantime, checking ingredient labels for chemicals listed as either PEG or ending in the suffix eth. Both of these can be indications that there could be 1,4-dioxane contamination, and 1,4-dioxane is a carcinogen. We're also seeing increasing use of formaldehyde-releasing preservatives in shampoos across the board, including children's shampoos, and this can lead to formaldehyde contamination. And then also ethanolamines, which can lead to contamination with a class of carcinogens called nitrosamines. Those are sometimes listed as DEA, TEA, or MEA. In toothpaste, the one thing to be concerned about, and it's not common in most brands, but is common in some, is triclosan. Triclosan is an antibacterial agent, and it's common in hand soaps, as we'll talk about in a moment. It's also in some toothpastes. Triclosan has been linked to thyroid disruption and other endocrine concerns, and so we think it's very strongly recommended to avoid that ingredient, especially in toothpaste where it could be swallowed. In lotions, as I talked about earlier, fragrance can be common in lotions, so watch out for that signal that can be a stand-in for dozens of different chemicals. Butylated compounds such as BHA and BHT. BHA is a carcinogen, while we're concerned about some lung toxicity concerns with BHT. And as talked about just a moment ago, ethanolamines, PEGs, and eths, which can lead to some contamination. In hand soaps, triclosan is another significant concern here. Again, that's a thyroid disrupting hormone, thyroid disrupting ingredient, as well as possibly contributing to some of the bacterial resistance that we're seeing. The good news is that washing one's hands for about 20 seconds with plain old soap and hot water is just as effective at killing germs. Soaps can also include fragrance, ethanolamines, and PEGs and eths. And again, those last two lead to some contamination concerns. In sunscreens, we're concerned about some UV filters that are specifically hormone disruptors. These include oxybenzone, sometimes listed as benzophenone 3, homosalate, and octinoxate. In this case, titanium dioxide in cream form sunscreens is actually a better alternative. So that's a little bit confusing, because while you're avoiding the titanium dioxide in the powders because it's inhalable, in cream forms, it's actually a better option. So sometimes it's not just the ingredient, it really is how it's used. And then shampoos. We've talked about all of these before except for coal tar. And the concern here with coal tar is that it's a carcinogen, and it's common mostly in anti-dandruff shampoos. So there's a list of some things to avoid. What else can you do? You can change what you buy. So as we talked about, there are a lot of different options available in all of these product categories. Safer cosmetics are a fast-growing field. So pick products without the ingredients that I've discussed. And you can use apps like Think Dirty to shop clean. Spread the word. Tell others what you learned today. Get involved. Share ideas with us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, or share our great visuals with others. We have lots of ingredient tip cards and other visuals that tell this story. And then finally, help us change laws. The market is moving, and that's terrific, but laws are the only way to protect everyone, no matter where they're shopping and at what price point. And you can find us at safecosmetics.org, breastcancerfund.org, Safe Cosmetics HQ on Twitter, or at breastcancerfnd on Twitter, and also on Facebook. Thank you so much.